So in the United States, the model that influenced us when it comes to copyright is came from Europe, no doubt. Came from England. Wow, surprise. Anyways, but you have to understand a little bit before we get there is that, and I brought this up before, we did not think about ourselves until we started to think about ourselves. The 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, people started, to philosophize about what it meant to own ideas, and like if you mixed your idea with your labor, then it was an idea with labor, it was your idea. It's like, this developed over time. But for a long time we were tribal, we're in villages, we're in small communities, and we thought about the community, not about ourselves. But when the rise of individual authorship or creativity came about with the rise of the notion of ourselves as individuals. Okay, you start to see intellectual property laws develop in the 15th and 16th centuries, primarily in Italy or in Venice, in regards to textiles and ways of making certain types of textiles. So you start to have that come. But when it comes to copyright, which is probably we'll spend a lot of this class talking about, because it's probably the thing that most of us can create is something that's copyrightable. In fact, if you're taking notes right now, or you made an Instagram post earlier and took a photo, like you own the copyright on that. It may not have any economic or market value to it, but you hold that. And you have to pay money to get that, right? So I talk a lot about copyright. We were heavily influenced by the system in England, and for the longest time, that system was run by was monopolized by a state-chartered company called the Stationers Company. And basically, if you were an author of a book, you'd bring your book to the Stationers Company. They would review it to see if you, were ripping on the monarchy of the time, and you would get censored or whatever. Over the head! But outside of that, they would print and publish your book, and they would own it, right? And over time, like, people were like, "Hey, man, that's some bullshit." Like, I wrote that book, and I don't even own it. So what happens in 1710 is a law passes. It's called the Statute of Anne, and this basically shifted the rights from a private charter, and rights of authorship, and it gave it to people, basically. Gave rights to authors, natural authors as in humans, and stripped it away from the publisher companies that had monopolies over that stuff, over ownership and stuff like that. So copyright went from being a private, copyright to a public grant. And when I say public grant, I mean, some agreement between creators and inventors and or authors and society that they will make stuff, we will consume it, we will give them a certain amount of time when they can make money off of it, so they keep making stuff, right? Now, how this influenced the United States was in two particular ways when it came down to writing the Constitution, where you'll find actually mention of copyright and patent. First of all, in the Statute of Anne, copyright lasted for 14 years. Now, that gave you 14 years of monopoly over that work. If after 14 years you decided that work was still viable in the marketplace, which very few works are viable after 14 years. We all know this. There are very few Star Warses and, Superman and Wonder Woman and, whatever Beatles White Albums like that come out, right? That are that important that after 14 years there's still a marketplace for these things, right? If the author determined there was a marketplace after 14 years, they could do a little bit of work and they could extend their copyright for another 14 years. Most people didn't do this, or they died just because people didn't live that long or care that much, and things just didn't stick around. Now, that's pretty reasonable, 14 years up to 28 years. Copyright currently lasts 95 years for works of corporate authorship, which is most of all the economically viable stuff that we consume. And then for human authors, natural authors like us, real bleeding human beings, copyright lasts for our whole life plus 70 years. So like my great grandchildren will be reeling in off of the profits from the royalties of the sales of my book or my music or whatever, right? Like, this is different now, right? This is the thing though. So, and the statute of Anne is after 14 years or 28 years passed, then this is the public grant part, that intellectual property became ours. That book became ours. It became society's. Just, in 2024, Steamboat Willie, the original Mickey Mouse, went public domain. It's actually a real big deal because of how litigious the Walt Disney Company is and protective of the mouse. Anyways, the whole thing is this. There's limited terms, meaning 14 years or 28 years if you extend it. And then when the copyright expires, it becomes the property of the public. It becomes ours, right? And these are the two ways that the Statute of Anne influenced the Constitution in the United States and then became the sort of core idea for our governing copyright and patent legislations, okay? So all of our laws here come from that. You look at the U.S. Constitution and, it was written by all like the richest, whitest dudes in America. A lot of people don't talk about George Washington, and yeah, that war was largely over taxes because rich people were being taxed. And guess who the richest American was? It was George Washington. So of course he, let's have this war so I don't have to pay the friggin' stupid people across the pond money, and let's get you peasants to fight for me. And then people will think I'm a hero. And I'll commission paintings of myself crossing the Delaware River. So all these dudes were rich. They were white. A lot of them were authors, painters, creators, broadly defined. And so they saw the value, and inventors, and they saw the value of protecting those things, okay? Now, listen, I will never ask anybody to read the Constitution. I think it's kind of like bull crap that people think like this is holy writ, especially written a couple hundred years ago. But every law, federal law in the United States comes from this, or the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights I always say is oops, I didn't think about, people should have freedom of expression or religion or you should have the right to bear arms, or, you should, have free speech, or, black people are people, oops, we missed that in the Constitution, Anyway, so if you really want to read the Constitution, you can look at basically, this, but there's something in there, it's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, aka the copyright clause, the patent and copyright clause. And it says this. You don't need to know much about this, but this is important in some ways, okay? Because every law kind of comes from this, from how cases have been litigated, legal precedents have been set, legislations have been written, And basically says Congress has the power to promote the progress of science and the useful arts, that's patent, by securing for limited times to authors, inventors, the exclusive right. Now, I think the most important thing is it says limited times. Now, let me tell you, listen, y'all Swifties out there, nothing Taylor Swift ever made in your lifetime will ever become yours. Ever. It's always going to be Tay's. Always going to be Tay's. Right? Because if she authored it, she's going to have life plus 70 years of protection, or if it's authored by a company or owned by a company, or she made it as a work for hire for a company, it's protected for 95 years. Sorry, you probably aren't going to live. You may live to be 95, but you may not live to be 115 when it passes into the public domain or whatever. Shake it off. The whole thing is like, what is a limited time? And the way that our Congress and Supreme Court specifically has interpreted limited time is forever minus a day. Ooh, ouch. Ooh, ah. That's a limited time. That hurts. That hurts me. 14 years. That sounds like a limited time. I'd be an owner of Enter the 36 Chambers by Wu-Tang Clan. It'd be in the public domain. Hey, if RZA renewed the patent, it'd still be in the public domain. I mean, renewed the copyright, it'd still be in the public domain. Anyways, limited times. Exclusive right, limited times. It comes from the Constitution.